All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Baseball Blueprint Podcast, your home for all things player development, where we highlight some of the best instructors in the game. Today, we are coming at you live from Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, at the Gaylord National Hotel, and we are here at the 2025 ABCA Convention. Now, we have a little bit of a gap here between presenters, socials, and then going into our hot stoves this evening at 9, so found a guest for us to podcast. Today we have none other than the Director of Baseball Operations at Bo Jackson Elite Sports in Columbus, Ohio. This is Brandon Szink. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Cody. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, guys. So this is going to be fun. This is going to be pretty similar to what we did with Casey, just a little bit of back and forth. And again, for the viewers here, this is going to be a little bit different of a visual. It's live. And forgive my weak setup here, but hey, we're going to make it work here. So let's dive right in. One of the things that I saw today from a presentation by Blankenmeyer, he was talking about athletic throwing progressions. That had me thinking a little bit. Brandon, when you dive into your throwing progressions with our guys with Bo Jackson, can you give the listeners a little bit of a taste on what that looks like?
Sure. Yeah. So I've got my own thoughts on a certain progression that I've taken from, Kai Correa and all, and have kind of made it my own, where we segment our throwing. You start at a certain distance, quick catch, you move to rhythm catch or catch with a certain footwork pattern, and always have a receiver doing something, whether it's catch and tag, or as you move back, you go double play footwork, position-specific footwork, whatever the case might be. Since implementing that, I've tried to, and you've been there for it, I've tried to kind of add to it, give different variables for our players just to get them moving differently. And in regards to athletic throwing, I really like, especially with our young guys, I really like having them do movement-based throwing. So what that means is whether they're throwing with a partner, throwing with a coach, getting them moving in different directions and feeling that transition from whether it's a run or a move, a couple steps left and right, forward, even backwards, to get them throwing off of throwing from a different direction or moving in or even if it's just them trying to find their throwing foot, the foot that they feel the most comfortable with throwing off of. But yeah, that's what I try to do at the facility. I know you've seen it before. And even, Ty did a great job today. But I've even gone to the point where, and I think we had a conversation last night with somebody where you want to get them almost moving in different patterns and different rhythms and getting them throwing from there. And one drill that I really liked that Ty did was putting, and we'll talk infield specific here, putting baseballs on the ground, having them field that close one, getting them feeling something or seeing something using video feedback, and then moving back to different baseballs and kind of letting them feel their own thing, work through it. And I know you're big into the video delay stuff. I think utilizing that for even throwing, as crazy as it sounds, is super, super beneficial.
Yeah, man. And from watching the guys today, from an athletic throwing standpoint anyway, a lot of guys go through their normal throwing progression, and then they come down to progression or compression throws. And we talked about it with Casey Dimko on the show too, and he had some incredible stuff with his throwing program as well. But a great follow-up to those compressions is adding the movement in, and I think that's been a huge piece of what we see with our older guys, our more developed guys who've been in the organization longer, is just the fluidity in the arm actions. And you look at transfers and exchanges, and a lot of that comes from those movements and throwing patterns. So that's been really fun for me to see my first year at the Dome, and getting a chance to implement that with our younger guys too has been a blast.
For us too, Cody, we obviously believe in long toss and all that stuff. That's a no-brainer. But we also live in Ohio, and I've said this to you before. I'm a huge believer in, and I'm not talking pitching right now. I'm talking position specific or position player specific. I'm of the belief that we don't throw enough in Ohio, and that doesn't mean high intent throwing. What I mean is throwing lightly with a partner, but also movement-based athletic throwing. And I mean, I think back to when I was a player and our catch play routine was, we're going to spend a minute from this distance, a minute from this distance, a minute from this distance. We're going to long toss, we're going to bring it in, and that's our 10-minute throwing program, right? But now you can get as deep as, I just mentioned it, segmenting the throwing for your high intent, even your medium intent days, but even on your light intent days, like, or your light workload days, I like to have guys throw. I don't know how you feel about that, but I like to have guys throw at least a little bit just to get moving, right?
Yeah, I think there are times that are few and far between where it's a no throw day. Now there are some drills where maybe we go heavier on the throwing, and the next drill we back it off, and maybe we work without that. We work into patterns or something else. But yeah, I mean, just having a plan is the biggest thing. I think a lot of guys, you hit nail on the head, especially in the north. When we get to this winter segment, it's really hard to find space, right? Especially when you're ready to stretch it out. And I think a lot of things that I take from our pro guys who come back during this time is watching their throwing progressions, right? And they're stretching out to not necessarily anything that resembles long toss, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But there, you see the sharpness in the throws, and you can see that like there's a focus on the accuracy, and there's a focus on like finding the right shapes to provide force. And I think even with them, they've got days structured with how they're going to throw too. But having a plan for that's the biggest thing for me. And I think everyone is a little bit different from an operation system. I mean, some kids' arms are able to rebound quicker than others, and I think just going through it with a plan when you're going through your development, and that's the biggest thing. Now, with that in mind, as we go through development plans, a lot of the things we see with younger players stem from pocket presentation issues. What do you have our younger players do from that standpoint in terms of like just trying to develop and introduce that concept?
Yeah, I'm big into, and obviously it depends on the age and the skill level that we're talking, but I'm big into starting off bare hand, you know, really feeling the ball with that glove hand, feeling that transition, that transfer. I like flat hands. I think flat hand, you know, there's a place for everything in what we do. I like flat hands. I used flat hands as a kid. I think that's great in, you know, feeling where you catch the baseball, feeling how you even transition up if we're talking two-hand lane. I really like mini gloves. I think mini gloves are great for feeling that catch point, pocket presentation. But just in regards to general pocket presentation, I think just getting guys kind of repping it out, even if it's just isolating an area of focus on their knees and just getting them showing the glove and getting, used to showing the glove. I know we're at the ABCA. You and I talked about the Valley weighted trainer yesterday, and I made the comment, and I like it. I think it's awesome. But on the flip side, I think about the young kid that, all right, the weighted trainer is going to force your hand down, but what happens when you get a lighter glove? The kid gets a lighter glove. Yeah. Now, is he going to baby the move to press through? The move to press through, right? So,
and I think that does kind of illustrate your point about like how we use our tools too. You talk about the flat mitts, right? Great two-hand lane tools, right? And so I think when we talk about cutting down hops, that flat mitt's kind of more difficult to implement, right? Yeah. Now you can work on creating angles of contact and rebound. I've seen that before too. But you hit the nail on the head. We talked about that the Valley weighted mitt, which is something that when you're trying to introduce your hand angles, the weight pulls down our flexion. And for those of you who are listening or aren't able to see on the show, when we make our press through moves as a forehand and even a rake through or a soak back move with our backhands, we're going to have some negative flexion with our hand, almost like our fingers go back to touch our forearm. That's what we're looking for. So when you make that move, as a young player, oftentimes the hand stays linear. You don't see the flexion in the hand. So by giving that weighted mitt, you do introduce that pathing. But yeah, I mean, there's a give and take to this. Do we want to fall in love with certain things? I mean, that's a tool where I almost exclusively use that tool to introduce the concept, and then I go straight to the unweighted mitt, especially our mini pick trainer, to where we can kind of refocus the adjustment now that we've got our positioning correct. Let's look for accuracy now. Let's try to make sure we're pocketing the ball in the correct way. So, it's so funny. You look at the amount of tools we have, and Again, you walk through the trade show here, and for those of you who haven't been here, I mean, this place is fantastic. This is a must see type event, but it's just toys and toys and toys, and a lot of it can help. And so when you look at this, it can be kind of overwhelming as a coach.
One thought to add to the pocket presentation too, and I don't know if you and I have talked about this before, but one thing I started to add, I can't remember who I got this from, but when we isolate the upper half, we get on our knees, we do the knee drills that you always see on Twitter. I started adding a rhythm, like almost like guys are running. So guys are on their knees, they're running, and then getting them used to the timing of their glove presentation. That's one thing I think gets lost sometimes, is the timing of the glove presentation. We've seen it at the facility. I've seen it in college. Like, guys are either super early with their hands, but mostly guys are super late getting down.
Yeah, and I think especially if you're identifying players with good feet to begin with, like if you've got a guy who understands tempo, and then there's a pocket presentation timing issue, to me that's a red flag, right? Usually, what I see, at least from the in terms of showing the glove late standpoint, it's because your feet haven't gotten into a good spot to present. But again, that's where the kneeling stuff is so helpful,
right?
Like getting them comfortable in those positions to where like it feels late, not because they're not showing the glove correctly, like the technique's there. Now we can identify, okay, it's the feet. Let's fix that and start to address different tempo patterns. And maybe it's a simple fix of like, you need to be ready sooner. You need to be in the path of the ball sooner, which seems like a very remedial cue. But I find myself feeding that cue more often now as I'm starting to recognize like the footwork piece of this whole game is very dependent on whether or not you can read that first and second hop.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. So now that we've kind of addressed the pocket presentation issues, because again, that's one of the things I see most for the listeners here, especially the younger levels, is poor pocket presentation. That can bail you out a lot as you get older, is being able to receive. Let's dive into the tempo. So Brandon, what are some things that you like to see? What are some things that you like to maybe implement with our guys at the Dome when it comes to creating tempo and better patterns?
Yeah, I love forcing them. Well, first off, using constraints for the young guys, getting them understanding how to shift their eyes a certain way, and their feet obviously as well. But as we get to the older levels, I think that's most guys do that already naturally. It's something that is pretty much taught universally. But I really like the what
is it the zone-based stuff?
The zone-based,
that was fun.
The zone-based stuff that we've done recently. I think that gets guys feeling the control, the rhythm of their feet in certain zones, in the certain catch points.
Yeah,
I've really loved that from a higher level standpoint. But yeah, we'll kind of come back to that within the lower level guy. Like, we'll just talk about your prototypical, everyone plays shortstop, everyone get to the right of the baseball. One of the things I like to tell guys is, start with that ball right at you. Think about just taking that slight step to the right, shift your eyes to the right, and then just kind of work from there as you expand that idea with those young guys. But as guys get comfortable with that, like I said, that becomes second nature. And then from a tempo and a rhythm standpoint, like the zone-based stuff, I think has been great at the facility. It gets guys staying active with their feet, understanding. We just talked about the timing, right? Sequencing and timing of their footwork patterns, their glove pre-pitch, or I should say pre-catch, and then understanding what the post-catch needs to look like. So
and so the setup for those of you who are listening, and you don't need a machine for this, but it does help. Is we've got a machine set up at home plate. We'll fire the same ball over and over. So essentially, this isn't a ball where we're trying to expand our range per se. This is more where we're trying to address the footwork. So we'll have 3 zones set up in front of the defender, and I'm going to say they're probably about 5 yards of depth and probably somewhere between 20 feet wide, something like that. And so you've got 3 zones of that nature, and they're all connected. And so we use dots, like throw down dots on the ground. You could use cones. You could spray paint a field. And as our players get their airborne prep step, if they're doing it correctly, they're landing post-contact. And so, for example, Brandon might be feeding that day, and I might be out with the players. So right when I see them get airborne, I'm going to call a zone. I might say 1, 2, or 3. Let's, for the sake of this, say 1's the zone closest to the player, and then 3 is the one closest to where the ball's being fired. And so whatever zone they hear, they need to make sure they're connecting with that ball or receiving the ball in that zone, and then working on their post-catch pattern through that zone. So one thing that we can do to start to make this really competitive is start to call out times. Hey, you've got to get your ball to first base in under a 4-4. Well, if they're fielding that in zone 1, which is closest to them, they better be on a 2-step pattern because that takes longer to get to. Mm-hmm. Whereas if they cut this down in zone 3, they might have time to set up into a nice little 4-step pattern. And vice versa. You might call it out and say, hey, with your zones, we're not going to do a time. We might do a post-catch reception pattern. So if I call zone 3, you're throwing this on the run. You're attacking. If I call zone 1, you're going to be really patient. We're going to work through a 4-step here. So really, your imagination's your limit when it comes to this. You guys can really address different things. But truth be told, like, this is fine off of fungo. You know what I mean? Yeah. We can still make that work that way. And I would encourage those of you who are interested in working through zone-based stuff to try it out. It really is, at least in my opinion, one of the best ways to teach guys how to dance. It's what I kind of think of it as like a metronome almost. When you introductory tools to where there's some fluidity that can be seen, and then especially from the younger guys, like they start to really kind of dissect hops differently because they know they have to field it in a certain spot, so they have to put themselves in a different position, whether to gain ground or attack late. So it's been really, really good.
I think the other thing it forced our guys to do this year, and this is props to you, it forced our guys to think more about the timing of their prep step.
Yeah.
Being on time, like you just mentioned, with the cue that you're giving them, I think it really forced them to be on time so that they could read. If you and I know you mentioned 1, 2, 3. We did it red, yellow, green.
Yeah. That was fun.
When you called green, they knew if they weren't on time, they weren't getting to that green zone.
Yeah, the threshold would have been too far. Yeah. So and that's really what it comes down to, as well as like there's a sense of urgency you try to create or emulate in a training setting. Right. We want this as game-like as possible. And yeah, is this an introductory tool? Of course. But within that, like, we can still be competitive and we can still create pressure, and we can give them that feeling of like, I got to get the ball out, which is really what I'm looking for. Even when we go to progress from this to maybe like live reps or something like that, where you're trying to simulate a real feel, right? I mean, and so luckily at the Dome, we've got the full indoor infield, and we have the space to where we can go live. And one of my favorite practice plans that you've drawn up this year is when we went live with our infielders, and man, that was a blast. Do you mind walking us through that practice plan? Because I know these guys are going to love it.
Yeah. So I'm big into progressions, whether it's two frames of thought here. I'm big into progressions from. We'll be moving into week 8 this week. So week 1 through week 8, progressing from week to week, but then also within the practice. Progressing within the practice. So we usually will start off with some sort of routine, and it's not very long. We want to give those guys a base so that they're not just jumping in cold into live ground balls. But yeah, a couple weeks ago, we got to the spot where, I felt like our guys were ready. It's almost like ramping up a pitcher, right? We're ramping up an infielder. I felt like our guys were ready to go live with some base runners. And again, kind of going off of the zone based stuff, we, even though we have the base runners, which are typically the outfielders, typically also the fastest guys on the field in our facility, we have them, so they're not cheating. We have them lay down in the batter's box. They're actually with their toes in the batter's box, so they're not cheating. Some guys still cheat, but I think our infielders got really comfortable after using the zone-based stuff and then progressing into that practice plan. It speeds guys up, right? It's that practice or that drill, that kind of full squad drill speeds guys up. Yeah. And I've seen it in years past when we haven't done the zone-based stuff. Those base runners win a lot more.
Yeah, they win really quick. Yeah.
And how we do it is, for the listeners, we do a point system. So, we've played to 21 before. We've played to 1 year. I think we played to 50 because the guys were enjoying it so much. But the infielders get a point if they get an out. The outfielders get a point, and I think the catchers will run sometimes too. We've even had pitchers run. They get a point if they beat the throw, and they have fun with it. They compete with it. But in years past, typically runners have won because, and we even see it early on in the off seasons, like the runners are the ones winning because the infielders' internal clocks just haven't caught up to it yet. But I think with the zone-based stuff, because we introduced it so early, and we've been harping a lot on pre-pitch this year too, I think they feel more comfortable with it. And we saw it. We've seen within the practices that we've done, we've seen it kind of go in the infielder's favor in a lot of ways.
Well, for sure. And I think when you look at that, you talk about that progression, and one of the things I don't want to leave out at all is progressing from that zone-based stuff and like I mentioned, implementing the clock and then going straight to the clock from the zones. And if you remember, that was ugly for a little bit. Like that's going to be really ugly when you go to the clock quick.
It starts ugly. It does. Yep.
And so as they start to recognize like how much more time they have than they think, and even beyond that, like the importance of ball security, like take care of the baseball. And so once that was addressed and once that was bought into, I guess is the best way to say it, adding the runners in was awesome because they knew like a lot of the mistakes they were making weren't mistakes that were forced by the speed of those runners. A lot of it was the perception of that speed. They felt like it was quicker than it was. And so the clock's great, and I there's nothing better than a visual. Now, do I love burning our outfielders out? No, but that's why we have 4 teams going at once, and they're able to really have fun without killing themselves there. But that was one of my favorite practice plans that I've been a part of, and I know from a player's standpoint, one of the things we like to do at the end of practice is say, hey, what did you guys like? What did you not like? What can we do better? That was one where they were really, really amped to do that again.
And I think back to, I mean, we talked about Ty a second ago, Ty Blankmeyer, but like he had that video of Devontae Adams talking about, we aren't here just to do drills. We play football. Well, in our space, we play baseball. Yeah. And again, we're lucky enough to have the full infield, right? Right. For us, we can go with a full. We don't have to have a pitcher throwing and a guy hitting to simulate a live rep and a live timing. So that's been. I think that's kind of the point we're trying to make here is we're able to use that drill, and we've done variations to it, but we're able to use that as well as the clock to simulate that infielder's internal clock. And I think going back to what you just said, I think the guys that get sped up are the guys that maybe aren't. I'm trying to be careful on how I say this. Maybe not used to that setting this early in the year.
Yeah, and full disclosure, a lot of these guys are making the jump from. We usually do 2 age levels at a time, 15, 16, 17, 18. As they make that jump from level to level, like and you're the small fish, the speed of the game doesn't just speed up for your class. You've got another class above you. Yep. And with the premier level players in Ohio, like we're getting, like you're looking at plays that you're not making that often, you're not having to make that often in a routine high school game, right? So, first of all, I love that. That's great. In that environment, it helps you get a lot better. But secondly, like understanding that feeling, like there's a sense of panic sometimes, and so that's something that isn't foreign to really good players. Like they feel that too, but wondering how to get through that and getting that in a slightly more controlled environment than a game, at least in the position a lot of our guys are in, our freshmen and sophomores are usually vying for varsity positions. So trying to push into that space is super valuable. Now, steering slightly away from the technical instruction, Brandon, when you look at our guys at the Dome and just, I don't like to generalize, and you know this, but if you were to say, you know what, here's 3 things that we do really well, and then here's 3 things that we can do better, just as an organization, staff, players, etc. I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but what would you go for those 2 things?
I think I would even argue. I'm gonna probably expand on this a little bit more. This question, but I would argue that some of the things that we really do well at are things that we could also get better at. So first and foremost, I think we have an extremely talented staff. I think we have a lot of guys that care about player development. I'm a big relationship guy, building relationships, and I think, and I think you're the same way. Relationships in the game are key, but as coaches, we've got to have those relationships with players to build trust, to better enhance the environment that we're providing them.
Yeah.
So not that we don't already do that, but I'd love to keep bringing in coaches that are of that same mindset.
Yeah.
So whether we see that as a negative or a positive, I think we're really good at technical instruction.
Yeah.
And I think we're very creative. Now, could we be more creative? Probably. And that's, props to you, props to Zarly, props to, all of the guys that have worked with us in the past and currently work with us that have provided in as bland, generic as it is, like provided to our kind of coaching toolbox that we have at the facility.
Yeah.
I think that's another thing that we do really well is we're creative, but we're also constant learners, and we try to learn from each other. I know, like, how many times, and we just did it the other day, you, me, DJ, and where we sat in the conference room and we just BS'd for an hour or whatever. In regards to things we can get better at, we're always just trying to find new ways to do things. It goes back to the point I just made about creativity. I think you're this way too, but like I always try to look at things with multiple lenses. I don't think we've ever had a coach that's been like one way, like my way or the highway.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
But I think if we can continue to look at things from different lenses, and I just think that's the way for us all to grow, whether it's individually or as a group. And I think it would do our players a disservice if it was the other way around, where it was the my way or the highway type mindset. I've been in college. Obviously, I've been in pro ball for a little while, and I think some of the best minds are guys that know they don't know everything, and or of that mindset that, hey, I don't know everything, and I'm willing to hear this guy, even if it's the guy that cleans the toilets. It's just something that came to my mind.
It's funny that Mike Deegan was on the show. He made the same comment. Like there are times where there's a janitor that works at Denison University with him, and he's like, man, I love talking to that guy. And there's other people in really high positions I don't want to hear a minute of, so that environment that you guys have done. And again, this is my first go around really kind of sinking my teeth into the dome. It's been a pleasure, man. I've learned a ton, and the crew that you surrounded yourself, with, it's been incredible. So especially shout out to our young coaches at the Dome. You talk about creativity, like what a spark those guys are to be able to assist in their ways and bring as much energy and thought and care into what they're doing. It's super impressive.
I know one thing that, and I'm very guilty of this, and I don't know if I've ever said this to anybody that we work at the Dome with, and I truly believe it. So, and then I'm going to tell a little bit of a story here, and you might not even know this about me. When I was growing up, I was big into art. I enjoyed drawing, painting, a little bit, colored pencils. Like I was big into the art scene, and I even did like advanced art in high school. I love graphic design, stuff like that. Anyway, long story short, so I was in an art class one time, and if you've ever seen me write, Cody, I get really close to the paper. And my art teacher, I would do the same thing, painting or drawing. My teacher would always tell me like, hey, if you're struggling or whatever, like if you're frustrated, just take a step back and look at the bigger picture, right? And for me, I think about that now as a coach, whether it's with a team or as the director of baseball operations and player development, like I've actually been able to, and this again, thanks to you, props to you here, I've been able to kind of take a step back in our practices and see the bigger picture now versus like before when the dome first opened, it was me and a couple other guys, and we're ingrained in that instruction, and we're trying to really focus on the technical piece of everything and not really focused on like how many reps this guy, this position group's getting, or how this drill, the flow of the drill. And for me, like that's where I've really tried to kind of see the broader picture, the broader painting, right? Instead of just seeing the brush strokes, now I'm seeing the whole canvas. So that's another thing that I think I would challenge our coaches to do, and I think our coaches do a good job. I think they understand that, but I think sometimes like you forget like there's more to the practice than just your one positional group or your one team. Yeah. Right. We have a lot of guys that are focused on just their own team, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. But don't forget that we're practicing at the high school practices with 3 other teams. For sure. Yeah. Right. So that's just another thing that I thought of as you were talking.
Wow. Okay. I dig it. We're gonna close it on that, guys. I hope you guys got something out of this. This is always a fun type of structure to do as a podcast. So it's being able to kind of riff back and forth. Man, it's a blast. So I hope you got something out of this. Special shout out to Valley Sporting Goods for being a sponsor. Thank you again to the Baseball Blue Book Network for partnering. Their app is free. Go check it out. They got a new newsletter as well. That's going to be really good for any players who are looking to get connected with college coaches. Brandon's a coach at Ohio Wesleyan University. You'll be able to find his account on the Baseball Blue Book app as well. You'll be able to find his contact info, social media, stuff like that. So it has been a blast, guys. Brandon, thank you for coming on the show and enjoying the ABCA with me. This has been a great weekend, man.
I agree. Yeah, I appreciate you, Cody, and obviously appreciate our friendship and the professional relationship that we continue to have. So
awesome. Well, guys, we will catch you next episode. We will see you later.
What do you think? Good stuff?